So what I'm going to do is write a simple unit test. So the idea is that I'm going to have some business logic and I want to make sure that it works properly. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'll create a directory and I'll call it, just for the sake, I'll call it biz domain. So I'm going to have my logic in here, and let's say, just for making a simple case, our business logic is that every sentence has to begin with a capital. That's it. We've got, if we have a bunch of sentences, we're going to look over at them, look through the sentences, and every time we find the beginning of a sentence, we're just going to, the rule has to start with a capital. So what we're going to do is we write a unit test for that. So we're going to call this simple, we'll call it a string utility test. And what we do is, to write unit tests, you state sort of facts. And public void. And we're going to make, let's say convert first letter to upper. This is going to be our fact. So let's think of an example. A very simple example is one letter, and we're going to see, first letter to upper. That's going to be the name of our business function. Oops, first letter to upper, and we're going to start with with one letter, H, and it should turn to a capital H. So this says, given a sentence that's one letter long, starts with H, it should, when we're finished converting it, it should be a capital H. So for now, we'll put the solution right here, and string, and we'll run it. I haven't written any code for it yet, but I'm going to run the unit test. And bang, it says this method or operation is not implemented. So we're going to make this pass. It's simple as that. We have to make this statement true. Any one-letter sentence gets turned into uppercase. So we take the string and we go to upper. Oh, and it's return. So trivial. We run the test again. Super. It works. So that's our first unit test. Not very complete. Let's make it a little more complicated. We're going to have a whole word. And so let's see that our unit test is failing. So we'll run it again. And it says it fails. Oh, why? Well, look at that. I expected just the first letter to be turned to upper, but I turned all of them to upper. So that's silly. So let's split this thing up. We'll take our string and we'll take the first character of the string. So that's 0, 1, like that. And we'll add it to the rest of the string. So everything from character 1 on. Yep. So that's substring. And so that's it from everything on. Let's see if we can make that test pass now. Yep, missing punctuation problem here. Run it again. Oh, forget to turn it to upper. Oh, and I left this part in when I copied it. Hey, great, that passes. So now, well, let's see if we have an empty string. Is that going to work? So let's think of another case. There's nothing, and there's nothing. So this should still work too, right? Oh, it doesn't. You know why? It says argument out of range. Well, of course, I tried to index something. I tried to look at something that had no length. Oh, so it's kind of a special case here. If the string, so I want to check if it's null or empty. So let's check if the thing's null or empty, and if it's null or empty, let's just return whatever they gave us. See if that makes it work. All right, so I have my little simple unit test here. So that's pretty good. Let's just make sure if I can do null. So if I give it nothing, like not even an empty string. Okay, like that. Oh, it's not happy. I'll fix it. I can, if I have something null, so I'm just saying, oh, if I convert some null thing, it should be null still, and it shouldn't, the program shouldn't trip on that. So let's check that out. Oh, that's great. Okay, so perfect. But you know what? I don't really have sentences here, do I? Because what if I were to start my string with something like this? Let's take this line here and just duplicate this. Move it down here a little bit, boom. And let's put a couple of spaces in front of this guy here. Well, let's put one space and one space here. And we run it. Oh, not happy, right? Because it should ignore these little blank spaces. So actually, this little algorithm I have here, oh, and it's also warning me that I could make this static. So this little algorithm I have here, even though it worked for all these guys, I'm going to have to do something different, aren't I? So what my job is to just make this test work and keep all these other ones still working. So it turns out, probably to do that, I'm going to have to go character by character and fix things up. So that's not so trivial. So how would I go character by character? Well, do we want to do that for this part of the test? I think that's another step. So here I am back again, and I made the whole thing work. And in order to make the whole thing work, actually what I did is I added, turns out I needed 3 more assertions to make my code work. I asserted that blank spaces at the beginning of sentences will be ignored. I asserted the case that we could have 2 sentences, and so the start of the second sentence should also be capitalized. And then I also added the ideas like, oh, well, question marks are also punctuation, so they mark the end of the sentences. And you can see that's all my unit test is, asserting what is true about how the business logic should work. In this case, it was, you can see it's like about 10 lines of assertions. That simple. Okay, and in my case, I did what's called test-driven development. I made the assertions about how the business logic works before I wrote the code. And this is the code I ended up in this was the result of my encode. Now, what I would do now normally is I take this code and I clean it up, because there's things about it, maybe a non-programmer wouldn't look at this and think there's any problems with it. I look at it and I see it could be simpler. But the trick is now I can clean this up, and as long as all my business logic assertions continue to be true, I know I haven't broken the code. Now, if I didn't have these tests here, and I wanted to clean up this code, that would be a very risky maneuver, because I would clean up this code and maybe I would break one of these tests. So that would stop me. It'd make me think twice as a developer about whether I want to even clean up the code. And if I start having those types of thoughts, then the code is going to get messier and messier and messier. And so this is one of the good reasons for why you want unit tests, so that you can improve the code without worrying about breaking it. So I hope that shows that, a unit test could be trivial, because you saw I started off with one line and that was a unit test. But then as I made my algorithm more complicated, I added more lines. I could have put these in separate tests as well, but I didn't. But the key was a unit test. The first unit test I wrote, I think if you saw me do it, it took about 5 seconds to write it. And it turns out for me to do all the rest of this, it took me about 5 more minutes to make these other tests go. And I did that very slowly. And this algorithm, I'm actually kind of surprised in some ways it was so easy. This seems to work on all the sentences. So that's a basic unit test. This is part of the code, and it would get checked in with the rest of the code, and it would be managed with the rest of the code. This is the solution for the algorithm, and this is the verification that the algorithm works. And they should stay together all the time. That's it. I hope that helps with understanding what a unit test looks like.